Welcome. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. As many people approach the end of summer, they realize they've traveled to the places they've wanted to discover what it was that they wanted to go and enjoy. Perhaps you wanted to go and take a nice little trip out to Niagara Falls in New York, or perhaps maybe down to Florida, maybe even extend a little further to Spain, Greece, and France, or perhaps Japan because you wanted to learn how to do origami. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is one who just decided to take such an interesting trip that I'm kind of curious to find out what the experiences were like. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program is someone who traveled in what he titled in his book, The Axis of Evil World Tour, on America's travel in Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. We certainly have a lot of opinions about these places, but let's find out what they were like firsthand. And we'd like to welcome Scott Fisher here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. The Axis of Evil World Tour. It almost sounds like an Ozzy Osbourne festival. What's going on there?
I kind of took off those old concert T-shirts that you used to see. Kind of went off that name for the name of the book there. Plus, yeah, puts it right out there. You look at it, you know where I've been. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think what's interesting, because we've had people sort of like you who have been to these hot spots, if you want to call them that, and it's true that there's a lot of opinion, especially here in America, of what these countries and what these people are like. Was part of the reason that you went to these countries because perhaps you got sick of American journalism telling us what they were all about, and you wanted to find out more about what it was really like on the other side of the mirror?
Exactly. I wanted to dive in and kind of get a feel for it myself. The problem is it's so hard to get into these places that the journey itself was several years as I was trying to get. That was so that made it a little more difficult. But I was living in South Korea, and the North opened up very briefly for Americans to visit a few years ago. So I dived at the opportunity and jumped right in, and was able to go up there with a few friends. So it was a pretty short trip, just about 4 days. But that was fantastic. I was studying about North Korea in grad school in South Korea, so it made for a much more interesting trip. Having already learned a little bit about the culture and things before I went up.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you also study the language well enough that you were able to understand how to talk with the natives, so to speak?
All my grad school in Korea was in Korean, so your dissertation, all that stuff. So Korean at that time was pretty good. Though it is a little different in the North. Definite words are different, the accent's different. It took a little while to get used to it and caused a couple problems. Using my South Korean style Korean in the North. They're
You Yankees.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what did you tell us about North Korea? Now, generally, if you bring this subject up with an American, they'll typically start spouting off about nuclear capabilities, and they're trying to race to build the bomb so they can blow up the world. But what is North Korea truly like, in your experience?
Well, the North itself is so isolated, and the government tries to keep people isolated. But once you get there and start talking to them, you realize that, on a day-to-day basis, they're just trying to get through their lives and do what they can to get through the day, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to get around, especially as an American, and especially once they realize you speak Korean. You're isolated on an island in the middle of Pyongyang, two rivers. And then on that island, you're on a peninsula, so you can't even get out of your hotel. You have to try to get off the hotel grounds where there are guards, and you have to try to get onto a bridge where there are guards, and then off the bridge where there are more guards. So you're very, very isolated. And anytime you're out touring, your tour guide is always with you. Several tour guides are with you, and then any spot you go to, there are local tour guides and security who kind of keep watch on you. So it's extremely, extremely difficult to get away and try to interact with someone, who's either not A, a tour guide, or B, working at your hotel, or, selling you drinks at some tourist souvenir shop.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, you pretty much always have some sort of a chaperone, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, even part of the tour, they took us to the Pyongyang subway, and so we go down in a beautiful, very extremely ornate subway system and subway stations. And we go on, and we go to get onto the car. Well, there was one North Korean on the car, and all of a sudden these 20 or so foreigners come walking on. And she jumped up, practically screamed, her eyes almost popped out of her head, and literally ran out of the car because she didn't want to be around any, unauthorized, any unauthorized foreigners visiting. So she went down to the next.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we had our own private car. My joke was, hey, I wish that happened in Seoul when I got on the subway. It would make it a lot more comfortable.
Now, how come North Korea wants to be isolated, sort of from the rest of the world, but yet we seem to kind of bring them into the fold as though they're all out to get us? Is that really what it was like over there?
It didn't seem that. I mean, they're brought up. I mean, literally in your math book in elementary school, it's, all right, Joey, or, I guess little Kim, kills 5 Americans, and little Pak kills 3 Americans. How many total Americans have been killed? I mean, these are some of the problems that they have in their elementary school math books. I bought a comic book while I was there that had a folk story, a common Korean folk story, but the North had changed the end of it completely versus what the South Koreans have to make for this very strong, autonomous, autarkic type ending to the story, to say you must only rely on yourself. So they're very, very strong and focused on standing alone, on not having, not necessarily any connections with the outside world, but any dependency on the outside world. And they really strive to do that. Variety of reasons. Now the main reason is because as their people would find out about how things are in the outside world, that would then lessen their belief and trust in their own government. So it's definitely for regime sustainability that they try to keep their people as isolated.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's the only country that I know of in the world where there are no tuners or dials on any radio or a TV set. Everyone just has a switch, government channel 1 or government channel 2, to even get rid of the possibility of people being able to dial in an outside shortwave radio or outside broadcast coming across the border from the South.
Oh, okay. Now, is Korean barbecue as good as everybody proclaims it is over there?
Fantastic. And we ate really well in the North. A lot of people will ask, due to the ongoing or kind of on and off famines that the North has, how we ate. And we ate really, really well, and the food was extremely good. And Pyongyang itself is known for a couple of dishes and that we tried while we were there. And they were quite good. And any of the South Koreans that we told about our trip were very interested to find out, how these dishes really were in the home of the Pyongyang cold noodles or something like that.
Oh, interesting stuff. Now, one of the other countries, of course, we're going to cover all 3 of them. Tell us about Iran. What is it about the people there that you discovered that just they seem kind of, I don't know the best way to put this, because we had a gentleman that was on our program, and he was a Canadian Jewish guy who actually worked for the Iran consulate, and he says they're kind of nuts about the way they do things politically. Now, what was your experience like?
Well, first off, extremely friendly. Could not have been any more different than North Korea. They have outside satellite TV, radio, cable TV. They have the internet, all of these things. Complete communication going back and forth. So nowhere near the limits that you would have in North Korea on information flow. But politically, they'll have democratic elections. But the real power center is all in the city of Qom. QOM is how you spell it. Uh-huh. And this small city of Qom, where the religious mullahs live, they're the ones who truly run it. It's like the Supreme Court on steroids, basically. And they're the ones who are, in essence, deciding what's going on, and they'll allow some elections. But at the end of the day, they're the ones really running the country.
Interesting stuff. Now, did you dress in the local fashions there?
Yeah, in Iran, before I left, I started to grow a beard, so to try and blend in as much as possible. And I knew I was getting there when about halfway through the trip, people started coming up and just started speaking to me in Farsi. So I knew I was definitely starting to blend in. And Iran itself is pretty multi-ethnic. I mean, you've got people from the northern areas of Iran that look Caucasian, and then people from the southern areas that look more Arabic. So there's quite a large mix of ethnicities in Iran. And so walking around, I was occasionally mistaken for an Iranian person. And you would hear this a million times as you traveled around. They claim that the name Iran is actually from the word Aryan. And you'll see like Aryan Hotel or Aryan Cookies or something like that, because they're laying claim to being from there. They do not appreciate it anyway, and it really irritated them to be lumped into the axis of evil with the Iraqis, who they just fought a 10-year war with. They don't appreciate being lumped in with the Arabic or Arabic culture. They definitely have their own strong, unique culture, and they don't like it being mixed up with outside cultures. So they're very clear on getting that across to you every time you go and meet somebody new or as you travel around the country.
Now, I'm kind of curious, Scott, because we're talking about Iran, and you're saying that they don't like to be lumped together, as you said, an axis viva with Iraq. So what sort of an opinion is being broadcast here in the United States that, from your experience being over there and with the people over there, you would say is just kind of bogus?
The Iranian people are extremely, extremely friendly. One of the friendliest groups of people of any country I've ever visited. And it's interesting. When you go to a place and you say, obviously they can tell you're a foreigner once you open your mouth and start speaking in English or a foreign language to them. You can see the reaction on people's faces. And Iran, the reaction was 90% of the time was, oh, surprise, and then welcome, flat-out welcome. And then when you said you were American, they were even more welcoming, which is not the case in a lot of countries in the world, including supposed allies like South Korea, for example. So they were extremely friendly and extremely welcoming. And I don't think that gets out enough in the media here. The focus here always seems to be, the crazy mullahs running the government and the nuke storyline, which is a valid storyline. I mean, war, countries getting nuclear weapons is hardly a good idea. But at the end of the day, most Iranians have nothing against the United States. That doesn't mean to say they want us to go sticking our nose in their business. They'd be more than happy and more than willing to defend their country if it were attacked by outsiders. But they're, on a person-to-person basis, extremely friendly, and they understand, like few other people I've ever met, the difference between a person and that person's government. So they're more than willing to cooperate with America and Americans and distinguish between our government, which they don't much care for. But they also, on the flip side of that, they understand us, maybe not liking their government, but also wanting some type of interaction with Iranian people.
Yeah, I know. It's just funny to think that a lot of people seem to have the impression, especially when it comes to Middle Eastern countries, that these guys are basically, and I've even seen this quoted many times by our own administration, and even administrations before this, going as far back as Lyndon Johnson and even Ronald Reagan, is the fact that you hear, well, they're barbarians, and it's like, where did you guys ever get the audacity to start, poking and prodding and saying that this is what these people are like, when you get too many people like yourself who have been over there, who have had some time with these people to discover that's totally really not the case, that these are just those isolated groups, if you will, that are out there as they are anywhere in the world, and they're even here in our own country, for crying out loud. And to say that that's what their culture is like based on something like that. Yeah,
it's like judging the U.S. on the KKK, for example. I mean, sure, those people are out there. That hardly represents the entirety of America. And judging Iran by the basis of its extremely religious right-wing leadership is not the correct way to do them. I mean, sure, there are people there who don't like it and would do anything to see us fail. But that is such a minority that any time you discuss it, it really needs to be pointed out that is a minority. Most people just are going about their day and have no problem in any way, shape, or form with Americans. They're extremely friendly to Americans. And that's the part of the story that gets lost because as sexy as talking about nuclear weapons and discrimination against different people or something like that.
Now, here's something I'd like to ask you, Scott, if you have the opportunity to observe this or experience the attitudes surrounding this, but what was it like in both, in fact, you can even answer this for all three countries, for the aging population? Did you see it much like it is here in America where, well, you're kind of, at that age, I don't know if I want to bother with you, you're going into a nursing home, that sort of a thing? Or did you see real community support for the aging community?
Yeah, North Korea, my exposure was limited, but from what I saw and from what I've studied and researched, they definitely have the Confucian Northeast Asian mentality of strong respect for older people. In Korea, the key cutoff is 60. Actually, most of Northeast Asia is 60 because at that point, I'm sure most people know their Chinese sign, whether they're a rooster or a snake or something like that. Well, there are 12 signs, and there are 5 elements in traditional Chinese mythos. And so if you take those 5 elements, times it by 12, the number of different years that they have, 60 becomes the magic number. Once you've gone up to age 60, you've lived through a full cycle. So anyone who hits 60 is entitled to a very special, very significant birthday. And then they are considered, then they're much more respected, anyone who's past this birthday. And in North Korea, I definitely got the feeling that older people that they had carried this. This is something that the North Korean regime did not try to get rid of and in some ways even reinforced. And which is also why they respect Kim Il-sung, the previous leader, and Kim Jong-il, is because both of them, part of the reason they respect them so much is both of them have passed that age of 60. In Iran, it also seemed very similar in not quite as strong, and the Northeast Asians are very, very strong on that, Confucianism. But the Iranians also, my guide was probably mid to late 50s, and he definitely got some added respect due to that as we traveled around the country. And I never really got the impression that anyone was trying to brush him off or dissuade him from anything because he was, in his mid or late 50s. And then at some of the sites we went to, the people in charge of the site were older men and well into their 60s and 70s, and they couldn't have been any more friendly, and everyone treated them with complete respect. And you see this in a lot of places, also in South Korea, as well as in Iran and other countries I've been to. A lot of times security guards are older men because the culture is so demanding of respect towards these security guards that it's not about a physical intimidation to get the security. It's about, oh, hey, well, here's an older person, and I need to respect this person, and so they generally are security guards, for example. And I did see a lot of that in Iran, in addition to other places.
I wanted to bring that up because we had a guest one time on our program not too long ago where her and her husband had traveled the Gobi Desert, in China. And that was pretty risky just in and of itself, not just for the physical aspects of it, but also for the reasons of how the government is in China. And they embarked on this particular travel by the time they were in their 60s. And so when it came time where they actually came across Border Patrol where they could have found themselves literally thrown into the tank, they said that they were paid such tremendous respect due to their age. And I thought, for some strange reason, you just wouldn't see something like that over here in America too often. And so it's kind of interesting that we can present opportunities like this with you where you can share, what are their attitudes about aging, over there in other countries. And it sounds like they really have a lot of respect versus, your time is done. What have you got to say, and that sort of thing. It's really encouraging.
Yeah, none of that, head south, sit on a beach, kind of thing. They're definitely expected and participate in activities. Obviously based on physical limitations, and as they retire, they enjoy their life. But a lot of times they live, if not with their family, they'll live in a very nearby building. In South Korea, that's extremely common, where, say, on the 5th floor is where one family lives, and then the grandparents live maybe on the 10th floor, for example, in the same building. So, they're kept quite close. And I'll never forget when my mom came to visit, a motherly lady. She won't listen to this. But when my mom came to visit, we got on a bus, and as we got on the bus, someone stood up and asked my mom to sit down, and my mom thought that was just the most fantastic thing in the world. And it kept happening as we went to different places by bus. And I didn't have the heart to tell her at first until later. She was going on, and she started asking me, why do they do that? Is it because I'm a foreigner? And she was thinking it was because she was a foreigner. So finally I said, no, Mom. If you look, they do that to anyone who looks like a grandmother. They'll get up and offer, any young person is required basically to get up and offer their seat to a person who looks like a grandmother or a grandfather. And I don't know, my mom was quite as happy with that afterwards. But and I noticed she refused to take the seat several times afterwards. But that's just, for me, it's a sign of the respect that they show, that the younger people will get up and give that seat. And if they don't do it, then somebody, say, in their 30s or 40s will say to the teenager or the person in their early 20s, hey, get up and give the seat to this person. And there won't be get up and they'll do it.
That's pretty encouraging to realize you'll see that kind of respect, because certainly as I've ridden the buses, even here, it's like, well, it's just so totally different.
Now, pregnant woman, maybe, but that's about it. That's all you're going to get.
Yeah. Now, what was some of the most enjoyable things you experienced about Iran? It sounds to me like the people are extremely friendly. They really love Americans. They hate being lumped together, in an axis of evil, as you talked about with Iraq. But what was some of the most enjoyable experiences that you had while you were in Iran?
One of the most interesting was...
'Cause I think their music's pretty cool.
Yeah, there was... one day we went to... This was near Shiraz, which is also near Persepolis. And as we were there, we actually went to a music shop and sat on an outdoor tea shop. And in Iran, it is completely illegal for two unmarried and unrelated male and female to be together in public. And they're very strict about that. You have to be extremely careful in that case. But there's a few places, and this one tea shop in Shiraz was one of the places where the authorities kind of turned a blind eye. And sitting in this tea shop, you could just see human nature breaking out all over the place. You're sitting there watching, and you could see, groups of guys and a group of girls, and then after a while, they would kind of make eye contact and kind of sidle up next to each other and sit at the next table and kind of whisper back and forth. And what they were whispering, and my guide was filling me in, and I got to kind of see it as it happened, they were whispering cell phone numbers. And so they'd whisper the cell phone number back and forth to each other, and then they'd start texting. And sure enough, sooner or later, after another half hour or so, different couples would form from the two groups sitting at adjacent tables and would then go sit at a more private setting, a more private table there in the tea shop. Completely illegal, completely against the law, but you can't hold back people in their 20s or late teens.
Yeah.
And so it was extremely interesting to do that. And the waiter came up and was joking about the guy sitting behind us. He's like, "Yeah, you see that guy behind us?" I'm not sure. "Yeah, I've met his wife and a couple of his girlfriends. I don't know who he's with now." So it was just kind of he was joking. He wasn't meaning to insult the guy or anything, but he was just kind of joking about that's what this place is kind of known for. So that was one of the more enjoyable things. It really brought home to me, A, how restrictive Iran is, but B, you can put all the rules out there you want. People are still going to do what people do. And so that was really interesting to me. Another day in Iran.
I was just going to say real quickly, one thing I noticed, as I was reading and looking through your book, is what I always found interesting, especially in Korea, is that they really love to do these large murals of their leaders. Why is that?
It is literally every adult North Korean has a pin of Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung on their chest. Any building you go into is going to have pictures of them. And even buildings that are North Korea related in foreign countries are going to have these pictures. Even the subway, not just the whole subway, every single car on the subway had a picture of these two guys looking over the car. And you ask them why, and they say it's a sign of respect, and that it's also a sign of adulthood. In the case of North Korea, you get that pin when you reach adulthood. But it's just a part of the regime being able to, or trying to be able to, make itself kind of omnipresent in the lives of the people. And the way the North Koreans do it is interesting, because they'll say, and you can even hear it sometimes, it's okay to not so much insult the government, but to complain about the government and ask for changes in the government at a local kind of bureaucratic level. But at a national level, you can't do it, and there's no way you can say anything in any way derogatory of the Kims. So what they've been able to do is channel people's discontent into government bureaucrats. Anything bad is due to these bureaucrats incorrectly implementing the laws and the notions of the two leaders at the very top. And so that's kind of how they do it, is more of almost a religious aspect to it, to where there may be problems in life, but that's not due to us. We're above all that. It's the people below us who aren't carrying out our wishes properly. That's where the problems are coming from. And it seems to be generally the case in other countries, even if they don't make it so blatant or aren't as good at it as the Kim family in North Korea, who, after all, have been in power since the mid-1940s, against U.S. sanctions, war, and everything else. So they've done a very remarkable job of being able to put themselves kind of above the problems that their people would be having.
It's just really interesting to understand a little more from this side of the mirror, if you will, that what we hear and read about these countries in America seems to be really watered down, and it seems as though the journalism when it comes to being over there, especially if they're involved with our military, seems embedded with the military to where you're not really getting the straight story, and it really it's quite amazing that people, especially in a country where education seems to be so valued like it is here in America, that we wouldn't try to find a more holistic way of understanding what's truly going on over there so that we have more of a voice to hopefully either deter or encourage the kinds of things that we are doing over there. And I know one of the things that you take a look at Iraq, for instance, and it's the contention that a lot of people relate Iraq with Saddam Hussein with the terrorist cells of Al-Qaeda, for instance, and you realize that, well, did he really have anything to do with this, but how journalism kind of lumped those together, and now we're at war in a little country like Iraq, which I'm sure is a lot smaller than Korea is, but yet we seem to be in a war that is almost as long or longer than what we experienced when we were doing Vietnam. Now, what did you experience while you were over there? How recently were you in Iraq?
Iraq, I was there late 2004 and early 2005. So it's
okay,
been,
so you were there when the war was going on then. Okay.
Yeah, I was there, and I was working actually with the government, with the Department of Defense at the time, and so I was living and working on a U.S. military base. I was attached to the Iraqi Survey Group, which was the group in charge of looking for weapons of mass destruction and related things, flying leprechauns, pink unicorns, and all the other stuff.
And did you find any leprechauns or pink unicorns?
No, they may still be looking along with the WMD. They may all be in the same location. So, yeah, that's what we were charged with looking with. And so Iraq, yeah, it's just indicative of people not knowing, as the WMD hunt or just the war itself, of people not really knowing what they're doing and what they're talking about. And these countries don't make it easy on themselves. I mean, to get into North Korea is next to impossible as an American. The only thing that's more difficult to get into North Korea is if you're an American journalist. So they really, really limit that. And the same with Iran. I actually got admitted, not this summer, but last summer, to the University of Tehran. I wanted to go and study Farsi. They have a summer Farsi program. So I was going to go and spend a couple of months in Iran learning Farsi and getting to know a little bit more about the country. But my visa was denied, and I was able to contact my guide and then check some things out through embassies and found out that they were denying all visas to Americans last summer. So even if an American journalist wants to go in and get information, they're going to be so circumscribed in what they can do and where they can go, who they can see, that it's very difficult for them to be able to get out the kind of information that they need to get out to counteract this superficial, all Iranians bad, all Iranians crazy, all North Koreans dukes. It's just so hard to overcome that, partly because of the journalists not diving in and doing what it takes to get that done. But the flip side of that is anybody they go in and interview, they're going to be endangering. You're endangering your guides if you give too much information on them. And it's almost impossible for them to get a visa. So if these countries were any smarter and they really wanted to play things better, they would open up a little bit more and let people come in and explore. And sure, they would dig up some dirt, but they would also be able to get out to the point that, the people actually aren't that bad. They're just normal people doing what it is that they do.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really the case, though, when it comes to just about any country for the most part, is that, people want to be loved, appreciated, and respected. They raise families, they go out to work every day. And I find it kind of really hard when you think of a country like Iraq that's been caught up in this war with the United States. Buildings are blowing up and being torn down. How you can continue to actually have, if you will, even something remotely close to an everyday normal life. How have you seen the way they've been able to adapt to that?
Yeah, it was incredible. We got one time I went to the airport, and we'd heard that was the place you could buy alcohol, which is kind of hard to buy.
Of all things, right?
We wanted a couple beers for like a Christmas party or something. So anyway, we drove over along the media-dubbed Road of Death. Drove over to the airport to go to a duty-free shop. And while I was there, I met a couple of cleaners, just a couple guys, a couple janitors in the area, and started talking to them. And my Arabic was very poor, and their English wasn't that much better, but we were able to communicate to some extent. And asking them about taking a picture. No, they didn't want their pictures taken because it's too dangerous. I asked them about going to and from work because this was supposedly a very dangerous road. And they said, yeah, but they usually would then stay there at the airport, not maybe go home at night, only go home occasionally. They saw my digital camera. They'd never seen a digital camera before. where I took a picture and instantly there it was right on the screen. I thought that was interesting. They asked me for the camera. I said no, but then they asked me to send them an email of the pictures, and their email addresses were both yahoo.com. So I thought that was funny. Just the range of experiences that they have. Yes, they have the internet, email, but they had never seen a digital camera before. They had to sleep at the airport because it was so dangerous to go home. Yet they were able to, have jobs and have this, relationship in some way with the outside world. It's just a very weird dichotomy. They're trying to do what they can to make life as normal as possible, but the trade-offs they have to make are just insane. But you got to do what you got to do, I suppose. And if that's the only way they can make money, they're doing what they could. The same with the people who worked on base. You would hear horror stories of these people because they weren't allowed to spend the night on base. They were basically kicked out off post every day as just for security reasons. Not something I necessarily agreed with. Anyway, they were all kicked off base, and so all anyone had to do was sit off post and look at the people coming off base, follow them home, and then terrible things could happen, and it happened quite often. And so these people were terrified, were scared to death every time that they had to leave base, and they would go to these all kinds of crazy routes and doing this and doing that to be able to try to get home without anyone being able to follow them and see where their family lived. Or they would go just somewhere and spend the night some random place and would only go home very, very rarely because they didn't want to endanger their family. So it's crazy the way people have just to go about their day, to go to work. And these are people who are not doing that bad because not only did they have jobs, they had jobs in the dollar side of the economy working with Americans or international people. So yeah, it was amazing to listen to some of the stories and how they go about their days. Wow, you realize how much you take for granted when you hear what these people are going through.
That's exactly why I wanted to bring that up, is to make people realize, what's really going on over there, that we can be thankful to be in a land that we don't deal with that too often, but to also bring into perspective, for instance, let's talk, with the war in Iraq, is there supposedly going to be an end to this? And from what I understand, as I was talking with the one that was part of the consulate of Iran, as he says, he really doesn't think so because now it's turned into a religious war now. Is that the way you perceive it too as you were over there, or what do you think?
Yeah, it definitely seems like we just stirred up. Again, people not knowing anything about the country starting up this war. And you've got the Shia, you've got the Sunni, and then you've got the Kurds, who may have religious similarities with some of the other people, but they're basing a lot of their decisions on their ethnicity, not so much their religion. And then in and amongst the different groups, you have the tribes. And so it's just so many different people with so many different reasons to hate each other that to be able to overcome this is just it's asking for a miracle practically. So whether we leave and let the place kind of fumble along on its own, which could be a nightmare for anyone that left living there other than the few who will be able to grab power, or whether we stay there and try best as we may to keep things sorted out, keep things under some semblance of control. There's no good answer. It's just a complete mess that we opened up by going in there. And in an ignorant fashion, mission accomplished 2 months into the war. No, it wasn't. And so it's just a horrible, horrible situation that we've dug up, and then leaving may be good for us and may help out, may save lives of American soldiers, but what's that going to be doing for the Iraqis themselves? That now, okay, they have freedom, but that freedom is being exercised in that they're using it to attack people that they've had grievances with for, decades or centuries. So I don't really see anything good coming out of it, whether we stay or go.
Well, it's really unfortunate that something like that had to happen, but, hopefully that there will be a way out. And I think it's very encouraging that we can bring people like yourself on here to the Beyond 50 radio program who have had direct experience and who've been able to extrapolate out of their experiences a way for us to see and understand the people, the culture, and what truly, for the most part, hopefully, is really going on over there, so we can have a better understanding that it's not about the world that's out to get us, but it's about what we can do in understanding this sort of fear and paranoia so that it doesn't happen again, that it doesn't continually perpetuate itself. Now, what I wanted to ask you, of all three of the places that you visited, North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, which do you think had the best food?
Iran, hands down.
Iran, hands down, and why is that?
Yeah. Every place had a local specialty, and maybe it was because my guide was so good. But every place we'd go, we'd try this local specialty, and it just got better and better and better. And a lot of it revolved around pretty healthy food: bread, rice, tomatoes. They eat tons and tons of tomatoes in Iran, onions. Things that I normally would like anyway, but the way they would spice it up, they wouldn't kill it with so much spice like you can get with some food, there's so much curry or whatever in it that it's just uncomfortable to eat. They seem to have a proper amount of spicing to it, and with plenty of side dishes where you could spice it up a little further or bland it down a little bit if you need to do that. It was fantastic, and you could just grab some bread fresh out of the oven. And this is where bread was first discovered, thousands of years ago, was this area of the world. And they know what they're doing. So it's fresh bread with a fresh tomato or feta cheese. They have tons and tons of different cheeses. And some of the best meals I had were just those three basic ingredients, but they were just perfect.
Outstanding. Well, Scott, it's been a pleasure to have you on our program today to especially encourage our listeners out there that, go to these places, go check it out. In fact, we actually had, it was about 2 years ago, a gentleman that was on our program that encouraged people to take vacations in the hot spots around the world, and part of it was because, economically speaking, you'd save a lot of money. Would you agree with that?
You do? Depending on the place, the Iranians will try to rip you off. As an American, you have to go on a guided tour and a guided tour only, so you have to pay a lot more. But a lot of these other places, you can really get in for a great price, and they're so happy to see you that you really do get to have a great time and get amazing deals on different souvenirs or hotels or food or whatever. So in a way, that's true. And by going there and interacting, you're face-to-face, de facto helping people and representing the outside world to people who maybe have very little or a very misunderstood concept of the outside world. So you're doing two good things, economically, and then you're helping yourself by being able to see these places and then hopefully come back and tell the people that, hey, it's not what the headlines say. It's not all about nukes and crazy mullahs.
Mm-hmm.
There are actually some normal, everyday people over there just going about their lives.
Not to mention that you probably have some really cool clothes now.
Right, exactly. You get some cool clothes, and you get you can do that. Yes, I bought this when I was in Iran. Yeah, you can throw those. Want to get that for people.
Not to mention, you can go to Iraq and you can watch the movie Jaws and hear it in their language. That makes it really exciting when the shark is chasing them in Iraqi. Well, Scott Fisher, it's been a pleasure to have you on our program today. Do you have any particular sort of adventures you're going to be going on to from this point?
Well, yes, I'm venturing into Washington, D.C. Be starting the Foreign Studies program at Georgetown next week. So that'll be a little bit different for me to be back in the States and actually studying about these countries in a little more detail. But hopefully I'll be all set to hit the road again in a couple of years with a little more info.
Well, very good. Again, Scott Fisher, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. And again, his book is Axis of Evil World Tour, and Americans' Travels in Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. And Scott, it's been a pleasure to have you on our program today.
I really appreciate you having me. I had a great time.
You bet. Thank you very much. I'm Daniel Davis, and I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in today. Also, I want to give a special thank to one of our sponsors, and that is HemiSync. And if you'd like to tap into more of your brain's innate abilities, enter meditative states reliably and easily, reduce stress, be more creative and productive, concentrate and focus your attention when needed, experience deep restorative sleep and refreshing cat naps, or just uncover your intuitive talents, you can do all this and much more with the aid of HemiSync audio CDs. They have been refined with over 50 years of research and development supported by numerous independent studies, reports, and articles. The patented HemiSync technology has been scientifically and clinically proven to be effective. If you'd like to find out more about HemiSync, just simply visit the Monroe Products website at www.hemi-sync, that's HEMI-SYNC, HemiSync.com, or just simply call 1-800-541-2488. That's 1-800-541-2488 to learn how this exceptional technology can help you achieve your greatest potential. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today. We do welcome your questions or comments. Just simply shoot me an email, Daniel at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50 with a 50. Daniel at beyond50radio.com. And you can find out more about our program and what we're out there doing. If you, again, have any questions or comments, or maybe even a show idea for us, we're always more than open to hearing about your suggestions. Also, sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Just simply visit our website at beyond50radio.com. And thank you for tuning in today. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.